Thank you so much for your patience this morning. It's really lovely to see such a full room. Welcome to our exceptional panel discussion on women in politics. We are so thrilled and honored to welcome Councilmember Julie Wong, representing the 26th District, Councilmember Tiffany Caban, representing the 22nd District, and Deputy Director of LGBTQ+ Affairs for Governor Kathy Hochul, Chanel Lopez. Thank you so much, really, for my heart, for being here. So just a note, I know we have so many students in here, which is awesome. There will be time for Q&A, so as you listen, when you checked in, you grabbed that note card and a pen, jot down any questions that come up for you. We want to hear your voices, we want to hear your perspectives. And we have our friends Clementina and Nancy and Carla who will come around with a bowl, so you can drop your note cards in the bowl, or if you want to just raise your hand during the Q&A, please do that. So I also want everyone to know that this is being live streamed by the LaGuardia radio station, so it will be on YouTube. So just want to make sure you're aware of that. And then at the end, we're having a raffle to raffle off some some fun swag bags, so be sure to stick around for that. And those are gifted by our friends over at LaGuardia Affairs and Campus Life. And so, without further ado, I want to welcome Provost Billy Gastick-Rosado, who will offer welcoming remarks.
Thank you, and thanks everybody. I appreciate this invitation for many reasons. One is a female leader at the college, but also I am the unique privilege of being the partner of a woman in politics in Connecticut, and she is a member of the State House of Representatives, and I can tell you up close how hard these women work in these positions, and how hard it is to get into that position, and how much of a difference it makes that they are on the phone, in the room, at the meeting. So my gratitude goes out to the electeds and to those who help support women in these roles. So I want to thank the organizers for bringing us together and highlight that yes, it is important for women to run for office, but more generally, just actively participating in civic life through voting, volunteering, and supporting candidates also means a great deal. We know that women are underrepresented in leadership roles across all sectors, and it's not just about numbers, it's about amplifying diverse voices and perspectives that are crucial for our society. So let's first talk about running for office. Women leaders bring different and important perspectives to problem solving and collaboration. They advocate for policies that reflect the diverse needs of our communities, often addressing issues that otherwise would be overlooked. Each of you has a voice that matters, and you have ideas and experiences and a passion for change. The women who fought for our rights didn't wait for permission, and I urge you not to wait either. Equally important to running for office is the act of voting. There's an election in less than a month. Voting is your voice in action. It's how you express your values and your priorities. When you vote, you support candidates who align with your vision for the future. And this is why it's crucial to stay informed about who's running and what they stand for. In local elections, a small number of votes can determine the outcome. Whether it's, sometimes it's the rain that affects people going to vote. It's remarkable how just the margins can be so slim. So you going out to vote makes the difference, and bringing a friend or two. Remember that change doesn't happen in isolation. It requires all of us to do our part, and so we step up. We either run for office ourselves, we vote for the person we want to, or we help volunteer our time to support candidates. I'm very excited to hear the perspectives of our panelists, and I want to thank them so much for spending part of their afternoon with us. Thank you.
Hi everyone, good morning. Welcome. Thank you all for coming today. This feels like it's just going to be such a warm and exciting and interesting conversation today. And thank you to our esteemed guests for coming. We are really, truly grateful. My name is Molly Rosner. I'm Director of Education Programs at the LaGuardia and Weimar Archives, which is right across the hallway in E238. For any students who haven't been there, please come see us. We are a unique entity in this college in that we collect the history of New York City. We have papers from the New York City Council, the mayor's papers, NYCHA, Queens LGBTQ history, and many, many more topics that you can explore and look at primary documents firsthand. So we are committed to making these documents accessible to our students and to the wider public, and really using history to inform contemporary civic engagement, which we feel is incredibly important, as the provost just mentioned. We also want your stories to be documented at the archives, so your experiences, your stories, your research. So come see us if you have ideas for projects. We're here to help you and to preserve contemporary New York for the future. So the reason I'm up here today is because over the course of the last 3 years, we ran a project about women in elected leadership that was inspired by the New York City Council's first ever female majority, which happened in 2021. And both Councilmember Wong and Councilmember Caban participated in interviews with our students, where the students researched their own questions and were able to pose all kinds of inquiries about their platforms, what it's like to campaign, the challenges, what inspired them. And they generously gave them candid and thoughtful responses that will be archived both online. They're on the website, the QR code on the handouts you found on your sheet. You can look at their excerpts from their interview, as well as the student research and photography excuse me, that came out of those projects. So I'm going to stop talking and show you a very short video that explains the first year of the project, and then after that you're going to get to hear from one of our incredible participating students, Egypt Tom.
At the LaGuardia and Wagner Archives, we run educational programs where students do historical research and then connect it with their contemporary lives in New York City. This program on women in government, in honor of the first ever female majority in New York City Council, is funded by the Robert David Lyon Gardner Foundation.
So the grant allows us to have paid internships for LaGuardia students to study New York history. And so we've endowed these internships, if you will, so we'll have the stipends in perpetuity for many more students down the road to become our next wave of wonderful New York City historians.
One thing I thought was really powerful about the project was that our students at the community college level, so early on in their formative experiences in higher education, have access to this experiential learning and these research skills that I'm sure will serve them well at the next stage.
Combining in-person and Zoom sessions, the virtual meetings, we were able to get the best out of both worlds. You know, I have interviews with representatives who are really busy, but still we're able to do it, something that we won't be able to accomplish if there was everything in person.
Very important for them to recognize the importance of qualitative work and documenting people's actual experiences, because you don't get them much from certain statistical work that just looks at averages or probability.
We've been fortunate to interview them or have the students interview them. And so we've heard what the council members think. So it's felt like this real sort of organic connection to the community.
Being able to take part in a story about my own community was both meaningful and impactful.
I think that I got a better understanding of the political system here in United States and how is the representative system works.
What I'm learning the most with this project is the ability of go into situations or go into projects and take my ideologies away from me, and just being able to be more objective.
It's almost surreal to be a student and sit there in front of these elected officials and feel heard and listened to. I think that's definitely something that was completely different than an experience within the classroom.
This project's different because you're creating something, like I'm collaborating with other students in like a way that's creating something that's, you know, staying in the archives that other people will refer to. It's more exciting and it's more hands-on.
Being able to interview council members has been a real treat. The process of kind of, you know, deciding what your questions are going to be, what you're going to focus on, how you are going to prepare for that interview.
Did you see any other women in government burnout, and what do you think New York City leadership can do to support women and encourage them to do things like run for office?
I think it takes work for current leaders, whether they be elected or faculty advisors, to encourage, to see something, the kernel of something in young people and help them navigate the very tricky road to getting elected.
As the mayor was selecting people to be deputy mayors, I don't even think he realized until, you know, there were 5 of us that we were all female. He felt that he was picking the best people for the job. So I believe that we've come a very long way.
As women who think about running and who, you know, have to be asked to run, you know, women often have to be asked 3, 4, 5, 6 different times to run for office before they actually do. You know, it's something that is that way because our society, you know, kind of molds us in that way. But, you know, step into your power.
For me, this was kind of, you know, this kind of showed to the people in my district in the city of New York that a young woman, can achieve whatever they want to achieve as long as we set a goal and we work hard.
For anyone that is looking to get involved now, like a lot of it will be circumstantial, where you can't resist but to get involved because it's something that's getting your blood boiling, whether it's climate change or racial justice, public safety, whatever it is. That's the avenue that you want to explore, because when you're passionate about something, there is no stopping you.
One of the way that I like to tell students to look at the archives, not just the past, but also the future. All 3 students are people of color, you know, something that maybe wasn't represented 50 years ago as much. So now they're contributing to history, and then many years later, other people of color who would research will have points of reference.
We are just really excited about this project, focusing on women in government, focusing on how to encourage our students to become civically engaged, foster community, which is what LaGuardia Community College is all about.
I would like to thank everyone for the opportunity and also working with a great team. I felt like I was never lost. I always had hope, and it was fun giving and getting critique. It's just a great experience.
Hello everybody, my name is Egypt Tom and I'm one of the students here at LaGuardia Community College, and I was fortunate enough to participate in the Women in Government Research Project. This project allowed me to work closely with like-minded peers, but also further explore my interest in advocating for women's rights. Being a full-time student and employee is challenging, but the women facilitating the project showed me much patience with accommodating all student schedules for meetings. Through this project, we got to interview many council members, which led to sharing many laughs, tough discussions, but also shared understandings of women's issues. These council members made me feel seen and heard, so I felt like my voice was respected as well as important. With this project, I proved myself to be capable of real historical research. I never expected that I'd participate in a political science or oral history project during my college career. And now I can say I've successfully worked alongside New York City councilwomen as well as future women leaders. My research project was focused on how reproductive policy is impacted by the representation of women in government. This is a research project I feel passionate about and investigated on a local level while also seeing it debated on a national stage. Since completing this work, I have been inspired to continue furthering my education in political science and potentially attend Hunter College in the fall. Without these women inspiring and encouraging me, I don't know if these are things that I would ever have considered for myself. So I just wanted to say thank you to the councilwomen we interviewed and all the people who encouraged my work in this project. I can speak for myself and the other students in saying that your mentorship made all of the difference in our college careers. Lastly, I hope this brief speech of mine has inspired other students, especially women, to become more involved in politics, because our representation matters. Thank you, Egypt. All of the students who participated did such incredible work, and I just want to shout out the mentors involved in the project as well, Professor Shippen, Professor Voivodich, because the one-on-one work you did with them and the help preparing for interviews is a really special experience. Looking at today's political landscape, we find ourselves in strange territory. City Hall is in turmoil. The presidential election has taken twists and turns that have been unprecedented and led to the first Black and Asian female presidential candidate. And our election is upcoming. So this is an incredibly timely event, and I want to get right to the panel. So I'm going to introduce Professor Anya Voivodich now to talk about the panel.
I think it's officially afternoon, so good afternoon, everyone. Hello, so my name is Anya Voivodich. I'm a lecturer here in the Social Science Department. I teach political science and global politics. Some of my wonderful students are here. It's nice to see you. I promised I'd be very brief, so what I'm going to do is just introduce our wonderful panel today, which is of course dedicated to exploring crucial themes in women in politics, which I also researched, so I'm very excited to hear this. So we have 4 pioneering and impressive panelists. Thank you for your service in general. So we have New York State Senator Kristen Gonzalez, Council Member Julie Wan, who represents our own district here in Long Island City, Council Member Tiffany Caban, who represents the 22nd District of New York City, and yes, feel free to show some love, and Deputy Director of LGBTQ+ Affairs for the Governor Kathy Hochul, Chanel Lopez. And this panel will be moderated by our very own Vice President for Student Affairs, Alexis McLean, and our very own wonderful Professor of Political Science, my colleague, Dr. Nicole Shippen. And without further ado, our panel.
We're going to jump right in the interest of time, and I'll be asking the first question. This is in true Alexis McLean fashion. I often joke that I'm a plus, and so I've lost both my pen and almost my phone in the first minute. It's all right. Thank you so much. It's one of the things I love most about myself.
The mic. It's on, but we can't.
All right, I'll speak a little louder. I think this might find effective frequency. But can you all hear me now? Better? Awesome. All right. So I'm going to jump right in. This question is for all of the officials sharing the stage with us today. Why did you run for elected public office in general, and the specific office in particular? Or how did you get appointed to your position? What did you envision being elected would allow you to do in terms of public service that perhaps other types of political participation could not? And we'll ask anyone to jump in.
Only because I want to cheat a little bit and say something else before I answer this question. I know that, it's really humbling to be celebrated in this space and be able to talk to y'all, to people on She/Her. But like you as budding historians, I just want to give you your flowers and celebrate you and just share two very, very brief stories, if that's all right. I carry this notebook around just because people every day say and do and impart brilliant ideas and sentiments, and I want to be able to capture them and sit with them and think about them. And so over the summer I went to Oakland with a partner, and we went to the museum, the art museum. We went because they had this exhibit. It was like this queer Chicanx exhibit, and so I'm excited to go to this exhibit. And we get there and they're like, "Are you here for the panel?" And 3 of the queer Latine artists were there to do a talk about their art, and I was like, "Oh my God, this is the most incredible fucking thing ever!" Right? So we sit and we're watching them, and it's 3 queer femmes, and they started talking about history and historians and remembering as a political strategy, which really sat with me in a very, very big way. They talked about remembering as a political strategy and embodying as a political strategy, and that oftentimes we do a little too much separation between studying the past and what we're doing now, but we talk about the history being our roots, right? And I said, well, a plant is the what you see above ground and the roots. You cannot separate them, and what is living here and now and growing in the future will die without the roots. And so that was an idea that really, really stuck with me about how important history and historians are. And so thank you for your studies and the work that you're doing. It's really, really cool. And the last plug I'll make is that there's a graphic novel called Wake by Dr. Rebecca Hall that talks about women-led slave revolts, and that makes the case for why we need diversity in the space of historian work, because she was able to do that research and make obvious conclusions to women and black women and brown women that white crusty old historians could not possibly make looking at the same information. So I just wanted to say thank you. And then I'll make my story for why I ran for office super short. I ran for office, honestly, my first time running for office was the district attorney's race in 2019. And it was a couple of different things. I was banging my head against the wall as a frontline defense attorney. I was a public defender, and understanding that even when we were seeing reforms or policies, my clients, my predominantly Black, brown, and low income, at the intersection of mental health or poverty or substance use, were the exception to really nice sounding policies every single time. We were never getting ahead. Justice was not a thing. And there were a lot of personal life circumstances in my life, I'm gonna be real with y'all, that made it possible for me to take what felt like a very scary risk. I was 7 years into public student loan forgiveness, and that was scary to walk away from because I got a 6-figure law school debt still. I was in the middle of a really big breakup. I was living with my partner for 3+ years, and it just felt like a new beginning of her. I didn't know what my future looked like, and I had a homegirl tell me, "You should do this," and I was like, "Well, we can't say no to the homegirls." But really, it was about healing too, because I saw who was in the race. A lot of it was, there was a playbook at that point on these progressive prosecutor races, and what brings people to child work is usually their own trauma. I come from a family that generationally lived in public housing, with history of substance use, with history of intimate partner violence, with history of economic insecurity, and experience both the harm, but also the deep, loving protection and joy from individuals that I really care about, and it internalized this idea that there's no such thing as good people and bad people, just people. I wanted to be able to heal myself and provide opportunities for others to heal, and like that brought me into that work and that world, and that's why I ran. Very, very close. We did some good stuff, and then I needed time to heal. Like people asked me to run immediately afterwards for state legislature. It's like, no, this isn't aligned. I need time. Also, it's not like it doesn't line up with what I want to get done. And I ran for council, the intersection of like the uprising and the pandemic, and it just felt like the other side of the coin of what I was trying to do as potentially a district attorney, building out life-affirming care infrastructure, which our local government has.
Good afternoon. It's so good to see you all. And my name is Julie One, if we haven't already met, and I currently represent the district that we're sitting in, Long Island City, along with my state senator, Kristen Gonzalez, who also represents Long Island City. I also represent a sliver of Astoria, along with my colleague here, and Woodside and Sunnyside. I feel like my colleague and sister Tiffany has just said, right, that we need to take moments to process and remember. And I'm just absorbing everything she shared. And I just want to, acknowledge, I was there when she ran, and she ran her ass off to be the district attorney. And in my mind, she still won, okay? There's a lot of crookedness out here, as you're seeing firsthand. But in my heart, she's still my district attorney. But now I'm thankful to call her my colleague, and I think a lot of what she just said resonates with me in my heart, of how trauma can really become our wounds and trauma can become our greatest assets or our greatest goal or vision or motivator on the work that we do. For me, I spent 10 years before coming into government working for a large tech company. And I grew up on public school free lunch. And I remember sitting at home because I was a consultant. I traveled Monday through Thursdays, and I just got a phone call and they said, hey, there's a pandemic, we're not traveling anymore. We're gonna sit tight until we figure out what our clients want us to do. So I'm sitting at home, turn on the TV, de Blasio, the former mayor, comes on and he goes, public schools will be shut down. But don't worry, it'll be online, and if you get public school free lunch, you can come and pick it up. And I think about myself in like 3rd, 4th grade. Anytime there was no school, that means I had no food. My parents, I had no daycare. My mom worked at a nail salon, my dad worked a lot of odd jobs. They would lock the door behind them, my brother and I would stay at home, and they'd say, just eat whatever's in the fridge. And for a 3rd or 4th grade me, the best thing was a stick of butter, because I thought it was ice cream. But it wasn't a lot of nutrients. And the days that I didn't have school, I really felt that. When my brother and I would share one ramen packet with more water so that we had more soup to share. So that led me to do a lot more food deliveries. So at the time, because I had the privilege to, I was serving on boards of multiple nonprofits, and one of the nonprofits that I served with, I started to make phone calls to our partners saying, hey, there's not going to be food for a lot of these students who live in my district. Do you know anywhere that I can start doing food deliveries? So, unfortunately, in partnership with Rethink Foods, I was able to start doing meal deliveries. It was literally my dad and I, since I didn't have a car. He would go all the way to Chinatown, pick up food, drive it all the way back, and we would go to Queensbridge houses, Ravenswood houses, which Queensbridge House is the largest night in the whole country. And as we're doing meal deliveries, it was great because you get to build friendships with people that you normally wouldn't cross paths with. And I remember distinctly, weeks would pass, and the pandemic goes on, and kids are still hungry, but we're able to provide food at least twice a week. And I befriended a little girl named Natalie. She was 8 years old, and at first I thought it was strange because she was sitting at a bus stop every single day for more than 6 hours. And growing up, I didn't have a car, so I thought maybe she was waiting for the bus. But 15 buses passed, and she's still sitting there by herself. So eventually I started to befriend her. It was tough because she had a rough exterior. You know, stranger danger, that's good. And eventually I realized she was going to school, online, using Lake NYC because she didn't have internet. And that really pissed me off. It's one thing when you're hungry, it's another when you have a basic need, because at this point, if your government is telling you, go to work on the internet, go get your government services on the internet, re-register for your driver's license on the internet, and there is no internet. Right now in 2024, we really should be treating Wi-Fi or internet access just the same way we do for electricity, hot water, and heat. It's a basic utility for every single human being, and we should not be punishing people who can't afford $100-something internet bill. So I start calling my elected officials, and I start asking them who can get these people internet. I start doing research avidly, and I learned that de Blasio at the time had more than $150 million for broadband access that has been set aside for multiple years, that just sat there with no movement. So I started to get extremely frustrated, and by then it was already like very close to the election, and people were like, "Why don't you run?" I was like, "I don't know anything about the government or politics. I just know that from my job as a federal contractor, I know that with $10 to $15, I can get a hotspot for every single individual, and it would be high-speed internet for 15 devices. That's all I know." And some of the folks that I work with in tech companies, they're like, "Why don't we just try?" And I was like, "What do you mean we just try?" Like, "Well, you know, there's like 15 of us, and I could be your treasurer, I could be your digital strategy, I could do this, I could do that." And we're all sitting there on Zoom, and we're like, I mean, like, our work is so slow, we have extra time. If we could bring an app to market in Europe or in emerging markets in Asia, and we're able to bring it from 0 followers or 0 users to 2 million users with a certain amount of revenue and profit by X number of times. So if there's 185,000 population in your district and we're trying to bring you to market, we have about 5 months. I think we could do this. And then we're all like, okay. And then we start to talk to political consultants who actually do this, and they're like, well, we can't canvass, it's a pandemic. We can't really have a rally, it's a pandemic. And then my friends and I were like, well, we can have organic growth online, because at the time, because of Trump, we couldn't purchase any paid ads on any social media platform for politics. So then we had a competitive edge, and we were able to do our thing, and then on election night, we looked at each other and we won, and then we're like, oh wait, does this mean you have to quit your job now? We can't work together anymore? And that's what happened. And fast forward, I get to serve with amazing people like Tiffany, who I've followed before I was even thinking about going into government, who've inspired people like me, like normalized people, to be like, hey, maybe you can run, even though I didn't have money, so I had to work the whole entire time. But fast forward, within 8 months of being elected, now every single NYCHA resident in my district has free Wi-Fi, as well as cable TV, because seniors were very, very explicit with us, like, Wi-Fi is not enough. I don't even have a computer, I don't know how to use the computer, but I want to know what's happening in the news, and I can't afford it, as well as unlimited call and text. And that's in perpetuity for the rest of eternity, because it's a 3-year contract that renews for the rest of eternity, and I'm going to protect it for the rest of my life.
Hi, y'all. My name's Kristen. My pronouns are she, her. First of all, I just want to say thank you for having us, and thank you for putting together such a phenomenal panel. Can we give these incredible women another round of applause? I'm definitely so inspired by the folks sitting on this panel. So a little bit about myself. I was born and raised right here in Queens, in Elmhurst, Jackson Heights. Do we got any Queens kids in the house? Yes. And, you know, I wasn't also someone who was planning on running for office, but I got involved in politics really young and really early when I was in high school. And that for me came from, you know, spending the first half of my educational career going to public school in Elmhurst, where like our gym was a emptied out classroom, and we'd run in circles and do some kickball, which, you know, for a 4th and 5th grader, it was enough space. We had fun. But then, you know, I had this opportunity when my mom, who I think like so many of the folks I've spoken to in Queens, I was raised in a single parent household, worked multiple jobs just to keep a roof over our heads, food on the table, so much of what you've heard here today as well. You know, my mom noticed that we were under-resourced in our schools and actually, you know, wanted me to have the ability to get a better education. And we talk about the power of internet, and I actually was watching Julie do this work too when I was organizing during the pandemic around public internet initiatives as well. So super inspired and appreciative of the work that she's done. But my mom literally Googled like good schools near me, and she was like, oh, we'll find a Catholic school, even though I'd been kicked out of Sunday school, so we weren't sure how that would go. Maybe some other charter schools, things like that. But it actually gave her back a list of 10 of the top independent schools in the city, which are the top schools in the entire country. And I applied, they walked me through the process, and I had this incredible opportunity to go to a independent school on the Upper East Side. And what that meant for me is for the next 6 years of my life, I commuted from Jackson Heights, Roosevelt, where the last thing I would see getting on the train was a long line of migrant workers getting free breakfast from the local Catholic charity, and then pop up every morning on the Upper East Side in 86th Street, where the first thing I'd see there was the Starbucks and the long line of businessmen with their suits and their briefcases, and it just became so stark to me that this city looks so different in different places, and we always hear about the tale of two New Yorks, but I really lived it. And that's what inspired me to get involved politically young, because we have enough in this city and this state to give everyone the quality education that they deserve, and the quality resources and the dignified life. And getting involved as a teenager was scary. I think when you're young and you're entering political spaces, oftentimes our voices are kind of pushed off to the side. I see some head nods and I'm I felt it too. But I was also really inspired at the time by reading feminist authors like Bell Hooks about coming to voice, right? We need to be able to wield our power, speak our truth, and that empowered me to go to college. I studied political science and race and ethnicity studies, and the race and ethnicity studies department at my school was actually started by the Young Lords. It was a result of activism on campus. And, for me, that actually, to the points that we heard earlier, really connected me back to, as a Boricua, Puerto Ricans in the house? No? Yes! We'll chat later. But really, really connected me to that longer history. And I worked in federal government, I worked in the Obama White House, Schumer's office. And what I realized is in the highest places in government, because we all, we have a federal election, and we need to get out, we need to make sure that we vote. But I also am here to say that having been in those spaces, one, I didn't see a lot of people like us, like I see in this room. And two, some of the biggest decisions that impact us actually weren't happening over there. They were happening at the city council and state level offices. And so I came back to New York, I changed careers, I started working in tech, I feel like we share a lot of different identities. Organizing my local community around public internet, community land trust, on my community board in the census. And when in 2022, there was a new district drawn, it was the people who I was organizing with who asked me to run for office. And I wasn't initially I was I'm an organizer. I actually dealt with a lot of imposter syndrome, so my first impulse, especially as a young woman, was, I'm sure there's somebody else. I'm sure there's someone who's older, who is just wiser, you guys, me, I will help them. I literally said, I will help you find someone. But when it became really clear that in that new state senate district, we were going to have, a field of candidates that were really funded by corporations and real estate, and there wasn't someone who was going to take that bottom-up and grassroots approach, I made the decision to run for office. And even though we were outspent 4-1, had over $1 million raised against us, had a redistricting process where my district lines changed, so now I represent 3 boroughs, so love to Astoria, Long Island City, love to Brooklyn, Northern Brooklyn. We got any Brooklyn in the house? Yeah. All right, that's really good. In Greenpoint, Williamsburg, and then the east side of Manhattan as well, which is completely new territory. And all of this to say, what I learned and why I ran was just everything you heard from these 2 incredible women today, but really the power of all of us in this room to win these seats in the face of money, in the face of power, in the face of interests that are not ours, and the power of young people especially, because again, I see a lot of young folks in this room. Your voices do matter. Your voices are needed in office desperately. Like, I chair the Intern and Technology Committee. Like, y'all, come with me to Albany to do like education on digital divide, digital literacy. And so I believe in all of you who are here in this room. It's why I ran. It's why I want to continue working on all of the things that we talked about today. But yeah, I'll stop there and turn it back to you.
Okay, I guess I'm next. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Chanel Lopez. I go by she and her pronouns. I am not an elected official yet, but I am an appointee by the governor. And a little bit about me, I was born and raised in Spanish Harlem. Back then it was called El Barrio. You know, now they call it East Harlem. I did not like politics at all. I did not. I mean, I grew up, I'm Dominican. I grew up in a toxic, masculine home where everyone, their vision of talking was really arguing. And what was the main conversation with my aunts and my uncles was always politics. It was either politics in the Dominican Republic, it was politics here, and so I had a negative impact on politics. I was working at a nonprofit organization providing services for survivors of domestic violence and intimate partner, well, same thing, intimate partner violence, sexual violence, folks who were brought here to the United States under false pretenses by their partner, and then, so I was working with communities like that. And I wanted to grow, right? And I was like, how can I grow? And I'm not gonna grow as in this organization, right? And I wanted to really make a difference for my community. So I was talking to one of my colleagues at the organization at the time, and they had offered her a job to work at the City Commission on Human Rights under the de Blasio administration. And she was gonna go forward until they told her they needed someone bilingual. Because mostly folks in the community they were trying to reach at was bilingual. So she came up to me and she said, there's a position opening. I know you're not happy in this organization. I think you should go for this position. So I read the qualifications and I'm like, you're not gonna hire me. I mean, come on. You know, I haven't been to college yet. Listen, I'm a trans woman. Let me just stay here at this job. Because, you know, being a trans woman, we create our own barriers, right? Because when I started transitioning, it wasn't easy for us at all. We didn't have jobs for us, you know, available. When I first started transitioning and I was talking to my friends, they flat out told me, if you want to transition, you have to become a sex worker. Because people won't hire us. And if you want to go through surgery, I was actually one of the girls at 5 o'clock in the morning on the bus, knocking on legislators' doors in Albany, telling them the importance of having insurance cover gender-friendly care. But it wasn't until, you know, I got interviewed at the City Commission on Human Rights, and I don't know if you, I'm sure folks have heard of Cecilia Gentile, who was my sister, and I miss her every day. I love her because she's the reason I did get into politics. The job she was offered to her, she didn't want it. The commissioner spoke to her about me, and she actually told the commissioner, you would be crazy not to hire Chanel. So I went to the interviews, I sat there. I was someone who didn't like speaking in public at all. Oh my goodness, I would get tongue-tied, I would get nervous, I would be like, no, that's not for me. But it wasn't until I sat with the deputy commissioner and I was like, you know, so what's expected to me, you know, in this role? And so basically my role was going around corporate and organizations and training folks on the importance of pronouns, and, you know, basic trans 101. You know, like, oh, damn, you know, so that means I had to do a lot of talking, right? But it was one thing she told me that, like, really snapped in my head, and it gave me the motivation and the empowerment that I have today, where she told me, I want to put you in rooms where people are going to feel uncomfortable with your presence. Because not too many of me are in politics. And so I started going out there, people started knowing more who I was. I made a lot of friends in the de Blasio administration who actually went to Cuomo. And when the whole thing happened with Cuomo and the governor, who is now decided to take, place, she created an LGBTQ team. And so they called me, one of the people that I know called me, that was like, I think you would be great for this position. And I said, you think so? And they was like, yeah, you would be great. So, I started thinking, my grandmother actually passed away from COVID, but, I still speak to her. Spiritually, I sit there and I conversate with her, and it was like something said to me, well, if you want to make a difference, you have to be willing to change and be part of the difference, make that difference, right? So I ended up getting the position, and that's how I became the first trans woman of color, Afro-Latina, to be appointed by the governor as the director of LGBTQ affairs across the state. And I'll be running in a couple of years, so.
Thank you so much. I'm so moved by everything that's been said, and I didn't know I was going to cry so much today. So this question is for State Senator Gonzalez and also Deputy Director Lopez. You may have shared already aspects of this, but so please feel free to respond however you feel. So how have your personal experiences and identities, including professional and occupational experiences, adult life experiences outside of the workplace, experiences growing up, and racial and ethnic and sexual identities influenced your legislative priorities and representational responsibilities?
That's a phenomenal question, because I do think everyone always says, right, the personal, the politics for us, our liberation are very personal to our identities, very specific to our lived experiences. And growing up as a Latina, as in a working class household, and immigrant community, all of my politics are informed by that experience. And when I put together my own platforms, what I'm really thinking of is just what would have helped my own family and what it means to live a dignified life. And it is hard to even reconcile that this is where we're at as a society, that we're still at the state level and city level fighting for the right for people to stay in their homes, the right for people to have food on the table, the right for people to have internet, the right for us to have an education that is quality and also free. We want to, I support free CUNY, free SUNY for that reason, and good paying jobs. It shouldn't be that hard. So that's why I'm a democratic socialist. It's why in my first 2 years, we supported bills around, making housing affordable, good cause eviction and keeping people in their homes. As someone who represents a waterfront district and who's a young person who did organizing in the climate movement, I really focus on climate legislation, and in my first session helped pass the Build Public Renewables Act as a member of the Energy Committee, because we have the Ravenswood Power Plant in Astoria and what's known as Asthma Alley, right? Because we have public housing residents who are stuck right next to a power plant burning dirty fossil fuels, right? So being able to just directly connect those bills back to fights in our district, back to thinking about my own family. In my first year, again, as a young woman, I think abortion rights and protections were really important to me. And we passed a bill that was protecting folks' private health data who are coming to New York to seek their right to an abortion, but they can't be tracked by their home states. And I think it's really, all of these things are, again, informed by people I meet, but also people in my community, and ways that I think our state government, and really our legislatures, has a responsibility, right, to be responsive to these big battles that we're seeing at a national level, and making New York really set a standard and be a leader in these spaces. So really, really proud to have been working on those things, and I'm also interested in hearing from you, Chanel, too, what you think, as a legislature, we can do to be better, too.
Well, we can always provide housing and
yeah.
jobs for
Yeah.
everyone, right? It's for me, it would, I have a lot of lived experience, right? And I can resonate with a lot of my trans brothers and sisters. And so, like I said earlier, for us, it was never that easy to get jobs. I remember some of my trans girlfriends who were like, yeah, I got a job at Burger King, but I have to wear my dead name because it wasn't allowed back then to wear, their chosen name. So here you have this beautiful looking trans woman, right, trying to survive and trying just to live and have a roof over her head, but then she has a name tag named Billy. And then you can imagine the shaming that came from that and the making fun of from customers and from her own employees, right? And so I said that there has to be, I'm a former sex worker and I don't have a problem saying it. When I decided to transition, my family wasn't too comfortable with that. My family did not want nothing to do with me. So I was out in the streets. Because I was out in the streets, I had to do sex work to survive, to eat, to have a roof over my head. I lived in abandoned buildings. I also got addicted to drugs because I fell into depression. But I said, there has to be more from my community, like this cannot be it, right? And so, again, like I said, if you want to see changes, you have to be willing to be part of that change and stop complaining and do something about it, right? And I went back to school, I got into these organizations, now I work in politics. I'm very proud that when I started working for the governor, speaking with constituents and going across the state and listening to them and hearing what their needs was, we created the Trans Wellness Equity Fund, which is a funding that goes directly to trans-led organizations, and it goes to organizations that provide the services to the trans community, and right now is at $12 million. And we didn't think it was gonna grow 2 years ago, right? And just last year, we also created with the Department of Labor, we created a survey for the trans community to let us know what are their needs in terms of employment and, going back to school and just finding sustainable jobs. And so the fight, are we there yet? Yeah, no, maybe. We're halfway there, but the fight continues. And that's why we have to make sure that we elect people who their interest is us and who are gonna, fight for our rights and not bring us back to the 1920s.
The good news is, you all have been answered via your responses, the vast majority of the questions and I have for you. In the interest of time, though, we're going to skip ahead a little bit. This question is for Councilmember Kavan. While presidential elections are important, the vast majority of quality of life issues are impacted by local elections. How do we help young people understand that these elections are literally and figuratively much closer to home?
I remember I used to say when I was first running for council, local politics, hyper-local politics, super sexy. It is the most interesting and closest thing you can get to. And I'm gonna go into why I think that, but I just wanted to share a little bit of love because I love hearing Cecilia's name mentioned, and she was a dear friend of mine also, and I love hearing how she impacted this family so many. And if you live in districts, council members, call them up, tell them to sign on to my sex worker protection bill. Tell them to sign on to the Secure Jobs Act, and includes a coalition of trans women of color workers who are supporting that. We try to do some things, but local politics, yes, please. But local politics. In my family, my parents thought that they were doing the thing every 40 years by voting for a president in the general. And I don't say that to shame them or anything else. it actually makes a lot of sense because our government, our democracy, was actually not designed for everybody to participate. It was designed to exclude a lot of people from participating. And now I love it because like my parents, they do not miss an election. They want to know about all the down ballot races. They want to know about the district leaders. They want to know about the propositions. Y'all, in November, turn over your ballot. Prop 1 codifies abortion protections in our state constitution. Props 2 through 6, all I'm going to say is, because I can't tell you how to vote in this space, is that they are a bit misleading in how they are written, and they are generally a power grab by the mayor, and takes power away from the legislature and gives the mayor more power. Do what you will. Prop 1 and then props 2 through 6. But you know, the reason why my parents engaged in our democracy that way was, again, you know, my mom had siblings growing up. They grew up in public housing, and when my grandmother left my grandfather because of a physically abusive relationship, my mom dropped out of high school to help take care of the family, right? Like, she didn't finish school. She worked a lot. My dad did finish high school. He got a union job, and to provide for his family was working doubles, triples. Like, I don't know how anybody in that situation with 2 kids is supposed to really meaningfully engage in their democracy, right? It's really hard. And so I think that our role, especially at hyperlocal government, is making it easier and more accessible to be able to engage in little and bigger ways. And the cool thing about local politics is you don't get to walk around and see President Biden and talk to him about some things, right? You don't get, I mean, even our Congress members or whatever, but like your council member, y'all, I cannot walk my dogs in the morning without getting stopped 10 times by 10 different people. But I love it because we are closest to our communities. We get to hear about every little thing, and it informs every single thing that I do in a really deep and significant way. And these are the things that you're gonna feel every day, right? Like, how many of you noticed when our libraries closed on Sundays? Yeah, well, that was something that is very hyper-local, right? It is your council and your mayor. And I gotta tell you something, when it comes to politics, I'm just gonna be really, really real with you. Politics are fucked up. And for the majority of elected officials, they will not do anything unless they think you are somebody that is capable of voting for or against them. If they don't think that you are a person demographically, for whatever reason, age, race, zip code, if they don't think that you're gonna vote, they are going to ignore your interests, period, right? And so whether it's libraries or something else, literally, not just voting, but if you send emails, if my colleagues get 200, 300 emails on an issue, they might not even know where they stand on the issue. They'll come into Democratic conference where we all get together to discuss bills and things, and they'll be like, I can't vote for this or against this because I got so many emails about this thing. Like, it's all about fear of whether or not the person is gonna vote for them. I'm not saying that that's everybody, because I think, you know, especially with the folks you see up here, I'm like, this is icing on the cake for me. I never thought in a million years that I would be here, and honestly, at the end of the day, I will go ball school, and if I get voted out of office, I'll go back to being a public defender. That was like my dream job. Like, we're gonna do the thing. But that's not, you know, that's like politics as usual. It doesn't really function that way. And so it's actually really, really critical to engage. And you have so much accessibility to be able to walk into an office or talk to them in person to have like this really deep impact. And I'm telling you, there's the fear that a lot of elected officials have of their electorate is real. You do not know how much power you actually hold. And if you organize just a little bit, if you get together with some like-minded people just a little bit, you can get a lot done. A lot.
Thank you so much. So in the interest of time, we're going to ask one final question and just allow all of you to respond to it. So in our roles, many students have shared a range of thoughts, such as they may not vote, they're not registered to vote, it doesn't matter, they're disengaged, what does this have to do with my life, and in general feel disappointed or overwhelmed by chaos. What do you say to them, especially first-time voters, many of whom are here today, in regard to engaging in the social political process, being part of the change they would like to see and live, and why their voices matter?
I mean, I was one of those people. I did not want to vote. I didn't care to vote. I didn't think my voice mattered. So when it came election time, I was like, oh, okay. I would hear the candidates, and it was no interest to me, right? It wasn't until I started working in politics, and it wasn't until I realized that my community was under attack, right? That I said, you know what? Voting does matter. And even though you think that your vote doesn't count, your vote could have put that person you wanted into office. So never think like your vote doesn't matter, your voice doesn't count, because a lot of elected officials that are in office is because you put them there, right? And they're here, we are here to serve the public. And so register to vote. It's important, especially these elections. I'm not gonna tell you who to vote either, but like Senator Gonzalez said, we worry about the federal, but there's also the state, and there's also the city. And whoever's in federal, chances are that if we put someone who has their best interest on us in the state and in the city, then it'll be hard for federal to do whatever they want to do with us. So go out there and vote.
As a first-generation immigrant, I came here in 1998 with my family. I didn't have the legal right to vote until I became a citizen. So for many of you who have the birthright of being a U.S. citizen, you were just born, and you know that once you're of age, you can vote, that is a huge privilege that many across the world don't even have in their own countries. So I just want you to really understand and recognize the privilege that you have to vote. And why does it matter? It's exactly what everyone was saying. I think one of my mentors when I was on the Hill living in Washington, D.C. as a college student, he would always joke around, and he was a little weird as a Congress member, but he would like make all of us eat clementines in the morning. I don't know why. Good for vitamin C. But as we were eating clementines, he would always be like, you know, if you don't vote, you're either at the table or you're on the menu, like you want them to eat you. And it's true, it's exactly what you're hearing, but if we aren't represented, especially during COVID, I had my neighbor who was 28 years old pushed into the F train because he had an Asian face. Because we were the Chinese virus. We were COVID. I'm not even Chinese, but I still get called Chinese all the time, and that's fine. You know, it's for another discussion, but for all of you, it's really important to recognize, yes, hyper-local politics, all politics is local. The same way you just heard, your Congress member can't do everything they want, especially if their local elected officials, state and city are not aligned with what they're saying. Because at the end of the day, if I go to the grocery store, I can't even go to the chicken aisle without somebody telling me like, hey Julie, did you see that pothole on that intersection? You better fix that. I put in 4 311 reports. I'm like, oh yes. And are you gonna get thighs or breasts? So you have to, like, how many of you in this room know who your council member is? Okay. And for many of you that don't, it's okay. I didn't even know who my council member was until I ran for office. Until I was like really angry and I was like, who the heck am I supposed to call? So it's really important to look up online, go on Google and say like, find your council member. Find out who your council member is. Find out who your state senator is. Find out who your state assembly member is. So that you know who to call for these issues, and you might not know. Like, people call us all the time about the MTA, and then we're like, call the state senator and the assembly member. And it's the same where they're like, oh, someone's complaining about DSNY, they're like, oh yeah, call your council member. We're like, okay, let's try to figure this out. But all of us are here to really serve you. And if you aren't voting and you don't even know who we are, especially the judges, I know Tiffany can talk a lot about the judges, there's a lot of wickedness at play, and we have to make sure that it's working for us in our best interests.
That is so true. And I just wanted to add again, like, having felt the disenfranchisement, having felt, shut out of a lot of these political spaces in the past, like, the feelings are valid. I get it, right? Like, I understand why, especially young people, are feeling demotivated when it comes to voting. But, for me, it's young people, it is us that are on the front lines of every single movement, right? We're out here, we're doing the work all the time. And I see this as an extension of our movement strategy to have people on the inside who are gonna, fight for the right policies, fight for the structural changes, and are gonna hear and be responsive to all of you here on the ground who I know, people in this room are already doing the work, right? Because I think a lot of times when people talk about young people not voting, they also assume that we're not politically savvy or that we're not out there organizing, when a lot of us are, right? So I hear and I see it. And of course, the stakes are high, we know this. A lot of times I feel like we're made to be kind of scared, like fear and kind of, use that as a motivator for voting. But for me, I also like shifting that a little bit, especially with young people. I do this from a place of love. Like, I care about this community. Like, I care about all of you. It is a hard time. Politically, things are not always looking great, but I genuinely believe that when we collectively organize and wield our power, we can make and achieve the dignified, better New York that we all deserve, right? And so, like, I'm here, I'm in this fight, I'm knocking doors, telling people to vote, we need to be in it together, and I need all of you. I need you to come out, support great council members like Tiffany and Julie, support your state electeds, know what's up in your own communities and hold them accountable. Because we can't do it alone, but I really do know that by voting and building also our political system, in addition to our movements on the ground, we can do better. So that's my
I like this question a lot. One thing that I also try to focus on is, because obviously, we feel motivated to vote because we don't like what we see. But I also want you to feel motivated to vote because you do like some of what you see. Like, we have made some really incredible strides. And progress, it's not linear. And Dr. Ibram Kendi says this in one of his books, but he's like, racism, oppression, like, that is on its own track. And they're gonna keep trying to make gains, right? We're not like pushing it, we're on our own track trying to outpace them. And so the fact that we talk about and fight and achieve some of the things we have within the trans community, I don't think a lot of folks thought we would have done that in the past few years. The way that sex work has come out into the forefront, what we have been able to do, the paradigm shift on public safety, so that you have lots of people agreeing to the point where, like, we have an alternative mental health response, right? Like, we're not where we need to be, but we have accomplished some really incredible things that I couldn't have predicted in the past decade. So that's like one. Two, y'all, I am the cautionary tale. When I ran for DA in 2019, I lost in a borough of 2.5 million people by 55 votes. Wow. It was 0.06 of 1% of the vote. It triggered the first manual recount in the state's history in decades and decades and decades. And there was a bunch of ballots got thrown out, there was a court case, like all of this stuff. So, somebody wants to tell you that every vote don't matter? 55, y'all. That's a few shifts, that's a few, it's tiny, it is that consequential. The other thing that I will say is that when folks talk about, disillusionment voting, I want to honor something else that especially exists within this presidential race, is there can be a lot of personal agony when it comes to getting out and voting, and I want to give you an example. If Trump were to win this upcoming election, there are a lot of people that will blame the left, or that will blame Muslim communities, or that will blame people who are standing righteously for Palestinian liberation and the end to a genocide. And to blame people for that is a problem, right? Because there's this larger question of whether our party's leadership, whatever party you're affiliated with, is meeting the country's base, the country's electorate, right? And we're seeing through polling that actually, it's not. The Democratic example is that the majority of people do support a ceasefire, yet there are other political pressures and dynamics at play that keep our federal government from doing those things. But I was at this event with Linda Sarsour, who, can I just say, gets so much vitriol, and when I 8 years ago met her for the first time, 10 feet away, when I first was approaching her to like meet her, I felt like in that moment, I understood why people hated her, the opposition hated her so deeply, because all I felt off of this woman's body and energy was like love and care. Something I had never experienced before. She oozes it from her pores. But she was talking about this election and the uncommitted vote and all this, and they were part of this panel that was talking about the we in democracy, that the we has to mean everybody. And she's like, the we? Like, you mean me too? You sure you want me up here? And the moderator was like, yeah, the we wanted you here. But these folks are in a place where they're being villainized if they don't go out and vote a certain way, and they're being asked to sacrifice a really huge thing, their families in Palestine, whatever it is, and they don't get to ask the question of, well, I am sacrificing this really, really big thing, our survival, my family's survival and existence, to make sure that Trump isn't president again. Well, when are you going to sacrifice something for us? Because we're showing up and doing the real we, right? And so, I understand that at times even, it's not even disillusionment, voting can be painful under certain circumstances. I don't have an answer to that, but just to sit with that and honor that some people are experiencing that in this moment, I don't know, food for thought in terms of when you vote, why you vote, when you're engaging other people and talking about voting. I've been thinking about that a lot.
Also, even though there were 55 votes in difference, they threw out 200 votes, so.
I got more votes than all, it's fine.
Yeah.
I like my job.
So we're gonna ask 2 questions, and we got more than that, but we really want to ensure that we give the lucky winners of our raffles their prizes before we officially close. So I'll defer to Dr. Shippen, and she will chime in with the question she has in her session.
Did the student want to ask their question out loud though, anybody? No, okay, that's why we have to spend it. Okay, so this is a question from a student in the audience. It's a 2-part question. What challenges have you faced as a woman in the political field? How do you think women's representation in politics has changed over the year? What still needs improvement?
So, the city, the city council now has a female majority for the first time in history. So I believe now we're at 32 women, and that's amazing. We're really glad it happened. It changes the dynamic of how we work. But what we're seeing, for example, at the last Women's Caucus meeting that I was at, and I have not returned because I still feel a little traumatized by it, is that not all women share our values or our vision for how we identify as women, or what we want to do as women. Because
the context is that for the first time the Republican women rejoined the caucus, so it's created some interesting dynamics in that space.
Yeah, the last meeting that I was at, they were trying to rewrite, I forget if it's the charter or the bylaws of the Women's Caucus.
I wrote the bylaw, they wanted to oppose it.
Yes, they wanted to oppose the bylaw allowing all women who identify as women to be part of the Women's Caucus.
Also including so just for the context is, and part of our mission statement and the bylaws, having the Women's Caucus be inclusive of non-binary folks, gender expansive folks, trans women, and trans and non-binary femmes, just be super inclusive, obviously.
So I say that to one, say you need to vote, because not all people, just because they identify as women, are the kind of women you want in office. And it's been really challenging, and of course we're going to continue to have these conversations to make sure that we move in the right direction. But it's been extremely challenging that just because we're all women in the room, that we don't always share the same interests, that they aren't fighting for the same things, and we're actually fighting against each other, and they're growing in number.
I'm feeling my phone vibrate because the students have to get to class. But we really want to ask this question. I might have a personal interest in asking this question. And this is for Councilmember Caban, being one of the students who are present. Being that you were the first person to call on the mayor to resign, have you considered running for mayor in the next election? No. No. I'm like trying to figure out what kind of response to give here, but you know, I ran for DA because I knew that I was an expert in a particular space, and I felt really moved to do it. I'm navigating and still learning the role that I'm in. I understand what my strengths are, where I want to grow. I think about everything I do in terms of my work in the context of movement ecology, right? And in any given moment, locating myself within movement and figuring out, given the tools, opportunities, whatever it is that I have in the moment. Can you guys hear me? Yeah. They're using that for the stream, so I apologize. And so it just, I wait for alignment to move on a thing. Would I rule out anything? No. I also get a little bit annoyed with politicians who, when you ask them, like, are you gonna run for anything else? And they're like, no, we're all ambitious fucks. Like, that's how we like, we have a level of ego, we have a level of ambition, and that's not a dirty thing. In fact, you want folks who want to use that ambition and drive towards a goal for the right thing. I'm hungry, but I'm hungry for my people, right? And so right now, I feel my role is one of truth-telling, one of doing and saying a thing before maybe some other folks are ready to do it, and then a week later, when indictment falls and everybody else is going too. And like, there's a role for that. And I think about the things that I want to do legislatively. I think about the things that I want to do in my neighborhood, in my community, on a hyper-local level. I'm thinking about some other things, because planning is important. Mayor is not one of them, but I do want to make sure that we get a mayor in office who's going to actually deliver for New Yorkers. So we have time for one last question. This brave soul, amen, sister. What's your name? Let me do my usual. What's your name? Where you from?
I'm from Jamaica, Queens.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I'm just going to go first.
Yeah.
Y'all should see me. No, okay, this is a question for Chanel Lopez. Being that, you don't have a background in politics, I also don't, and I'm like quite new to this. Coming from East Harlem, what is the approach to trying to converse with people who don't want to listen? How does it affect you to encounter these interactions, and what do you think?
That's a good question. I mean, it's not everyone wants to hear about politics, right? But it's about having important conversations and letting them know what representation looks like. I mean, for example, before I got appointed, there were rooms full of men who were talking about my rights and who were talking about your rights, right? There were men talking about, we don't want trans women in the bathroom, right? At the end of the day, I don't care who's in the bathroom. I just want to use the restroom, wash my hands, and walk away. You know, but it's so important that if I wanted to make those changes and be a force to reckon with and be present for my community and make sure that my community is being seen, being heard, and having a voice in those rooms, I had to love politics. And that's the conversation that I have a lot with elected officials I speak to, with folks who are running for office. I always want to know, like, what is your views on the trans community? Because a lot of the times we talk about all communities, but we tend to leave out the trans community. And so these are the type of conversations that I like to have with people. I have a lot of conversations with my community all the time because people in my community don't like voting at all. They don't. But, you know, I have to tell them, so how are you gonna get housing if you have someone that doesn't care of you living in the streets? How are you gonna get a job if someone elected who doesn't care about you and rolls back all these anti-discrimination laws that we fought so hard to establish, right? So that we can go get jobs, so that we can go get housing and not be discriminated. So those are conversations that I'm constantly having with my community. As a matter of fact, I'm flying out to Rochester tomorrow because they have Pride at the Polls. And so I'm gonna be speaking about the importance of, you know, voting.
I just want to ask that you all join Dr. Shippen and I in thanking Deputy Director Lopez, Councilmember Caban, Councilmember Juan, and of course Senator Gonzalez for sharing their time and their wisdom with us. Before we close out, I just want to give a heartfelt thank you to my sister, Dr. Shippen. A lot of time with our dear colleagues and our other sisters, Anya, Molly, Hara. I saw Hara here in the back. Professor Bastos is here. Dima, of course, Beravka is here with Professor Koken is here. This was really a labor of love. We're very excited to continue to bring events like this to the campus community. I will stop here and now turn it back over to Dima Beravka for our awesome raffle prizes.
All right, and shout out to Denise Cooper in the room and Campus Life for offering these gorgeous swag bags, and LaGuardia Cares. So our first winner is Stephanie Diaz. Come on down. Nashali Brena, are you in the room? Nashali Brena. Okay, Denise Lucero. Okay, Maria Jose Gretsch, come on over. Awesome. Diana Gizel, are you here? Diana Gizel? Okay. Harold Milford. Harold Millard? No. Khushi Verma. Sansan Lin. Bianca Johnson. Egypt Tom. John Jara.
I'm just going to do a typical VP of Student Affairs thing. John Hara is our SGA president.
Awesome. And Hermione Piedra. You here? Okay. Come on over.
Tell them about the event at Casa later. There's a speaker from Colombia who's a peace activist. They're doing a presentation at La Casa at 3:30 to 5. Please come to that event.
they moved their event so we could both do both of these events today.
Awesome. So again, thank you again, all of our esteemed guests, and students, and all of our collaborators. I just want to give another quick shout out, VP McLean, VP Manny Romero, and everyone in Communications and External Affairs, Professor Shippen, Professor Koken, Professor Riccio, and Chris were live streaming today. Dr. Molly Rosser from the archives, Professor Roy Boydich, and Carla Gazi from the Women's Center and the Hub, and our volunteers, Clementina and Nancy. Thank you, everyone.